which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No, we do. I didn't know how many it took. Oh, $5 counting.
Any comments?
These are the comments.
Oh, let's record attendance first. Emery?
Yep. Jeff Dimick, absent. Kyle Gangware. Is she calling in or absent? Okay. Emily Gaiman, absent. Nicole King. William Lysette.
Here.
Stephen Maud.
Present.
Mary Jo Reinhardt.
Here.
Priya Serene, absent. Christopher Wayop.
Present.
Do we have any other comments?
We have one, Doug Derman.
Good evening. I filed a formal complaint under policy 906 on March 29th regarding political signage in the classroom. Despite multiple follow-ups by me to Dr. Mann, I still don't have an answer, let alone an appropriate resolution. This board seemed to take the position in recent meetings that this district does not need a policy, that political signs are not permitted in the classroom, and that deferring to the administration's judgment under the dispute policy 906 would be sufficient. Well, my case makes clear that it is not sufficient. Parents should not be ignored, stonewalled, or strung along for 3 months. I have followed the rules. I have filed a complaint. That's what you suggested was the way forward. I've hit a brick wall. I again urge this board to adopt a policy that would help keep politics out of our classrooms, including political signage. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to meaningful action. Thank you.
Moyer?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Ryan. I'm reporting on executive session summaries. The board. Thank you. The board had an executive session tonight for the Act 44 safety and security presentation. Also, personnel issues were discussed. On June 14th, the facility committee had an executive session to discuss building safety and security as well as legal issues. On 6/17, the facility committee had an executive session to discuss school safety. On May 3rd, the facility committee had an executive session to discuss legal issues related to the intermediate school. Thank you.
Thank you.
I always just
So we need a motion to approve the board minutes of May 23rd
make sure I
and
can hear
the board workshop minutes of June 13th.
Second.
So moved by Mr. Maud, seconded by Dr. Whale. Any comments, questions? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Minutes approved. Dr. Mann?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Reinhardt. With respect to the facility update, we certainly update to the committee, but we do have on the agenda tonight a recommendation to approve Dewey as the engineering firm that will assist us in developing plans to correct and address the challenges that have been discovered at the intermediate school. And perhaps beyond that, I'll leave it to members of the committee who have been devoting very significant amounts of time and effort and thought to this project to provide additional information.
Thank you. The only thing I would add is obviously one of the pressing issues that we have is repairs or remediation of the brick issue at the IS and doing something as expeditiously as possible, which in today's current state with supply chain and other issues will not be most likely within the next, let's say, 10 months. But we can do our due diligence and get ready for repairs to be made next summer, as far as the engineering and what may be the best possible remediation to take place and how we could potentially even do a phased approach. So as part of the discussion and putting a solution together, we met with 3 firms and ultimately recommended Dewey, who does happen to be local, has some success in the district as far as a past building project in the Hope Middle School, but also has a very good reputation with other districts in and around Pennsylvania and particularly in the local area. So I think, based upon the committee and the administration, it was the best possible recommendation, although we had 2 very strong contenders and a third, but 2 very strong contenders that they kind of stood above the other in terms of their potential solutions and also their responsiveness. And again, the fact that they're local, we can assume that they will be much more responsive than someone that may have a distance to travel. I think that's all I would add. I don't know, Steve or Chris, if you have any additional thoughts.
Not particularly. I agree with everything Mr. Lysette said. We did a pretty thorough analysis of the proposals, and we've had others on the board review in person the areas in question, along with our facilities director and other people. There's no question that it's something that has to move forward. It's been delayed for too long, and it will continue to be an issue if we don't address it. So I would personally recommend, based on what I've seen and other analysis, that we move forward on this this final phase of the engineering effort so that we can move forward and have corrective action plan together and actually go through with the fixes.
And I just wanted to add for the community, so there was a pretty extensive study that was done in 2019, 2020. And we were made aware, the facilities committee and the board was made aware of the results of that study relatively recently. So I think, I have to say, I think it's something we've focused on and prioritized within the facilities committee. The study was, had pretty extensive, and the recommendations from that study. So Dewey was not the firm that actually did that study, but they're using that information. And I have to say, I think they were the firm out of the 3 that seemed to have the most experience with our particular issues, which I think the committee, and part of the reason why they were chosen was they seemed to have, that it wasn't because they were local, but it was because they seemed to have a lot of experience with our particular issues, which I thought was best. And we are trying to, really expedite this fix, so, lots of action.
Definitely timing issues on this. The engineering phase and this initial planning phase must get done before anything else happens. And it's crucial that we get that wrapped up so that the work itself, the bidding and the moving forward of that budget and everything else that goes along with that moves so that as we have time available, specifically next summer at this point, that we can take these corrective actions when students aren't in school, and we can move quickly and efficiently through the program. So, I would request that we approve this and move forward. It's a competitive bid in my estimation, and it's something that we really need to move on. Thank you.
And then the second aspect of the facility committee is we did receive numerous proposals for the stadium project. I think as soon as we're able to transition out of the initial work at the intermediate school, then we'll be scheduling interviews for the very promising firms who responded to our request. So I don't think
How many firms, was it
we had 6.
6 firms?
Six.
Great.
That's correct.
Great.
Okay, and so if that's all right then, we can move on to the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan has been posted for some time. The board, I think, voted on it initially. We have received no comments from the time that it was posted. And so we respectfully request the board to approve the final version of the comments.
The motion to approve. Comprehensive plan.
No, second.
Any further comments or questions?
I would just like to acknowledge and thank the administration, including Dr. Trinkle, for moving swiftly through that process. It's been significantly delayed. We were beyond our third extension on getting that wrapped up, and it was not started to anyone's knowledge at this point. And we had to make a quick go of getting this comprehensive plan together. And the next time it comes around, we will most likely be more diligent, I hope, in the administration process with the way things are moving. So I thank you for that.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Plan is approved.
And then, under letter C, request the board to approve the school board meeting calendar. I wish to note that in November, we have listed, instead of the 2nd and the 4th Monday, we have the 1st and the 3rd Monday. In doing so, we will, if we continue with our path, we would have the meeting on the Monday following Thanksgiving, which could have been perhaps a challenge for some. If I do that on the 1st and 3rd, we avoid that, although it's thrown off our schedule. So whatever is good for the board, obviously, would be how we want to approach this.
We're gonna take all these motions together. So, does anybody have any comments or questions for Mike that's here present?
Yeah, the only comment I would make is, I can't remember the school calendar, but historically, we had that Monday off, so it's probably best that we moved it to the 1st and the 3rd anyhow, since there would not normally be school that day.
And that's as it is. So, so then, to understand, Mrs. Reinhardt, so we would request the board to approve, numbers 5A through 5H.
Well, the calendar, 4C, 5A through 5H.
Okay. So that is a request to the board to approve items.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Lysette, thank you. Any other comments or questions on these items? All in favor?
I'm sorry.
Anyone approved? Opposed? Okay, all of those are approved.
And
About support services.
I'm very pleased, as the board knows, one of our goals is to address literacy in grades K through 3. And a very critical part of that process is how we intervene with students who need us the most, some of our students with special needs. And we're very pleased to be able to present tonight a program that we think will be able to support and address struggling readers who have specific challenges. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Dr.
We
Mayhew.
work included with this, and we look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Dr. Mahan just gave a preview, is that we've been spending some time on special education reading interventions for grades K through 3. And as a special ed department, focusing really on K-6, we wanted to begin a review of intervention materials in reading, math, and writing. This review slightly was adjusted due to the pandemic, as we had to adapt to flexible interventions that could be utilized in a virtual environment. This year, which paralleled very nicely to the review and then selection of a supplemental reading intervention for Hopewell and Libertyville Elementary, spearheaded by Dr. Mahan and Dr. Trinkle, We began exploring research-based and research-validated reading intervention programs at the K-3 level for the 4 special education classrooms. There were several programmatic needs that I have listed over there on the slide that were taken into consideration. We wanted an updated research-based intervention focusing on all the areas of reading instruction. We wanted to build consistency across our 2 classrooms and our 4 classrooms in our 2 buildings. We wanted to address the needs of the students in the specialized learning support classrooms, which are 2 classrooms that are housed at Hopewell but service both buildings. We wanted a program that was flexible to address the skills of the students in those classrooms. And we did want to look at whole group as well as targeted small group instruction. One of the most important points is that while we have reading interventions currently in place for our students at this level, our primary goal was to find an instructional program focusing on the best practices of special education research and methodology, but not so narrowly focused in an instructional area of reading foregoing another. For special education compared to MTSS, students are identified for services once a more significant gap is identified. More likely this happens at the 2nd or 3rd grade level. And many times, students come to the special education classroom environment for replacement instruction, which can occur across several areas of reading. So this could be decoding and fluency, could be fluency and vocabulary, it could be fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Therefore, we were looking for a comprehensive program that focuses on many of the areas in reading instruction as our instructional time with students is compressed. So these were the considerations, is that we wanted to have K-6 building conversations in the areas of reading and math interventions, but we did pare it down right now to K-3 reading. I had conversations with other districts in our area to say, what are some interventions that you've been using or using in your classroom settings? We did want this to be research-based. We did have a committee with the principals, the special ed teachers, as well as myself. And we did have 5 programs that we were looking into more intensively. The program selection, we decided to move forward with ReadWell. Thank you. We decided to move forward with ReadWell. And this is based upon the principles of Orton Gillingham, which also assists students with specific learning disabilities, but also in the areas of dyslexia. It is aligned to the best practices of direct instruction, research, and methodology, really focusing on direct instruction, which is really had been coming out of the University of Oregon from Dr. Kaminoe. Curriculum that provides explicit and systematic instruction in those 5 areas was integral, and that's what ReadWell does. It was a flexible intervention with multiple start points. So some of our programs are so specific that, for example, Read Naturally is a program we use quite often, but there are very specific pinpointed levels of where students need to enter in. This allows flexible starting points for students. So if we have a student who's newly identified, they can join a group based on that placement test, and they won't be so lost in that group. It incorporates whole group and small group instruction. One of the things I really, really liked is connected text for our learners so that our students would have access to nonfiction and fiction reading materials, especially when you're talking about teaching reading to students in grades 2nd and 3rd. We need to make sure that they have those connected texts with the intervention. And we are going to be implementing this across both of our buildings, across all of our classrooms, and that's the 4 classrooms at the K-3 level. And looking ahead is that these would be our next steps. We do have grant funding through the American Rescue Plan of $81,156 that we were granted to provide services to students especially if students were struggling throughout the pandemic, to cover the program costs and the teacher training. The implementation plan, I'll be working on that with the principals even prior to the teachers arriving back from summer break. And then we'll be reviewing that plan with them once they return. We will review current progress monitoring measures, and this is really important to determine if IEP progress monitoring goals need to be adjusted based on the new curriculum. We will be doing walkthroughs and check-ins with the special ed teachers during the week and scheduled group meetings across buildings. This can happen not only just in professional development time, but also in that morning meeting time as well. And then as we look ahead, partner with K-6 general education teams as they explore the K-6 reading resource to determine and if any additional reading interventions could be utilized at the 4 through 6 level. If there's any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
So this is an attempt to bring together a single intervention process
Yes.
across 4 grades.
Yes, for the classrooms of K through 8.
Prior to this happening, what was occurring?
So we would be utilizing different interventions for the students, and sometimes that would cluster with certain students. So like, for example, Read Naturally for Sunday, could be utilized Spire with some other interventions that were utilized. So we were able to utilize them, but this would kind of bring it all together under one umbrella rather than having different interventions for different groups of students.
And to follow on with Ms. Reinhardt's comment, I wrote down consistency of programming from your presentation. Could you compare, I'm sure there must be a need there based on the discussion of consistency of programming, and how is this different, and what were some of the things specifically that you needed to do to have the consistency between the different classes and the different schools?
So as we were looking at Read Naturally for students or Sunday or Spire, we would have different groups. Sometimes it would be at the 2nd grade level, sometimes it would be at the 3rd grade level. So all the students were getting what they needed. It's very challenging though when you have new students joining in, because what program would they be receiving at what grade level? And that may or may not work depending on when they're identified. We were still able though to get a reading intervention up and running for those students. With us having a more structured program, which is focusing on in a very structured way, we're starting lessons with focusing on phonics and phonemic awareness, focusing on fluency, and that structure being delivered within the program allows there then to be consistency of implementation at different times, even though maybe at different levels. The program and way it's being implemented is systematic and structured, so it has an ebb and flow as a teacher is going through the lessons, and will also allow there to be a similar type intervention at both buildings.
And then just a final question, then how in this particular plan does this compare to what you've seen or experienced with discussions in other school districts in the region? And you did touch on it a little bit in the conversation, but could you elaborate just a little bit on where we're headed compared to where we were, and how that meets current trends in elementary education and consistency with other school districts?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of districts that I've been having conversations with, they too were looking back at the interventions that they've been selecting because they've had them for a while. Some programs haven't been updated in a while either. Some programs that districts are using, such as Reading Mastery through SRA, provides a lot of direct instruction, but it's focusing a lot on decoding and fluency only. And so they're really not going into vocabulary development or comprehension. So where I see this going is that in research, is that they spend a lot of time on drill and skill, which is great. But when you have students who have deficits in other areas, it's also important to build a program that also has supports in teaching that broadens that umbrella to assist students in different areas of reading and not just only in decoding or building fluency. So it's really important, like I said earlier, it's about having kids have connections to real text, which is essential, especially as they go out to general education classroom settings, because that's what they're gonna be interfacing. So the research in special education had been a bit laboratory, if you will. So they were targeting specific skill sets like repeated readings and testing that with a control group or fluency throughout the University of Oregon, and they've been shown to be effective. But we have students that we're trying to minimize the gap that we're seeing. It's best to almost have like a sandwich approach, where you're focusing on the areas that need to be solidified, as well as continuing to develop other skills as well. And that's what I've seen as I've been a director here for 10 years, as well as in another district, is that sometimes when we solely target one area, we lose the ability of building a skill set in the other areas.
So then from a long-term situation, how does this look for students in years to come when we take these new principles in the curriculum and they move into later elementary and into middle school and high school and all of those other things that they're working on? How does this fit with that?
It does work very well for like students that are in a Read 180 program, which we also have as an intervention within our district, because that too looks at multiple areas of reading instruction and plus their reading passages of connected text. So it does align pretty well with what is to go ahead for them. It's about, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you very much for the
Yes,
presentation. Can you comment on the teacher training required for this intervention? I know it's been my understanding that some of these trainings, in order to utilize them effectively, requires a fair bit of training for not only the teacher and any aides and such, but I have kids who utilize some of these
Yes.
that you had mentioned. So can you comment on that, or is that do we have a process in place to ensure that our teachers, for everyone who is working with our students, that they're trained properly for this?
Yes, we do have a training day tentatively set up. Dr. Mann and I and Dr. Trimble and I will solidify that. It's a day and a half of training that will be happening over the summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckman. Actually, I want to commend the board for the questions you've asked, because they're spot on. We are at a point of limited resources, but we also want to focus the resources we have in ways that increase student outcomes. And in the comprehensive approach that's being taken, this is very much integrated into the work that Dr. Trinkle has been talking about. This completely syncs with the Foundations program. As a preview of coming attractions, we're talking about goals for the year in future meetings. And we intend to, while we have phonics in place, we have interventions for special education coming up. We're going to talk about looking at a core program, K through 3 this year, and then expanding that conversation in through 4 through 6 in subsequent years. So this is growing. It's working very well. So I want to thank you for that. And the point of teacher training, we need to be able to put in our teachers' hands the training and materials to allow them to be successful. And this piggybacks a bit on, there was a lot of discussion and actually some concern over our efforts to consolidate some of the computer programs and licenses that we had been using. In some instances, licenses were available to teachers, they were unaware, much less being trained. And so while that effort did save us some money, we're actually spending money here on this program. So our goal is not so much to cut, but rather to identify our resources and focus them in ways that improve student outcomes. And that is empowering teachers to do the great work that they do. So that really is the whole purpose, and hopefully there's an emerging theme into our efforts with respect to curriculum in this regard. So thank you all, and we didn't want to raise this to your attention and have you vote on the same night, but we will bring this back at our next meeting in the hopes that the board would support this effort. And certainly, if there are any questions in the interim, we'd be very, very happy to meet any board members to come in and talk in
Thank you. Support services?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Tonight, under support services, we have 3 items. The first item is the primary student transportation. That's simply a matter of timing. Typically, depending on when the routes are finalized and put together, whether or not the board meeting is sooner or after that work is completed. At this point, it's going to happen after. And transportation coordinators, Sunil and Rita Billick in the transportation office, have been working already with our transporters, Brandywine, to ensure that we have all the routes in place and all the students where they need to be in order to get the next school year off to a great start. So that's simply a little bit of housekeeping in that resolution. The Lehigh Valley Cooperative Purchasing Gasoline and Diesel Fuel bids did come in. As we suspected, it's a very volatile market. I think everybody understands that when they go to fill up today. They ended up having 2 bids. The initial bid was May 19th, and PAC.C.S, who currently has the contracts, was not prepared to bid, didn't have their paperwork together. As a result, Petroleum Traders picked up a portion of the bid. The bid is broken out between gasoline and diesel, and tank wagon and delivery. And it's kind of opposite the way it sounds. Tank wagon is actually smaller. And when you look at the pricing, you'll see that the transport deliveries are the big tankers. And the pricing actually came in pretty good compared to how the market actually is. So everybody on the co-op is recommending moving forward with the county's bid. The next item is the intermediate school brick masonry facade that was already discussed tonight. And I think in the description by some of the board members who are on the committee, the part that really needs to take place immediately is design, documentation, and bidding. And that will prepare the board to get a better understanding of what we're looking at in total. The construction administration phase will happen once bids are awarded, but as everyone, has had the ability to review and agree with the initial presentation that was given to us, the situation is not going to resolve itself. It's simply going to further deteriorate until we take action. So those are the items under support services. Any questions?
Just to clarify, from the initial engineering reports from 2020 to 2022 regarding degradation of the facade, it was estimated in the initial report that there was a 100% increase in degradation. Is that correct, Mr. Pepe?
Yes. Yeah, and the firm that actually did the report is who we had come back out so that we made sure that it was still the same set of eyes looking at the same issues to get a fair and balanced report on what they were seeing. And the engineer was able to say not only had we projected what was going to happen, it's actually deteriorating slightly quicker than we anticipated.
Yeah, and then based on our discussions with bidders, we also got some other opinions there with that as well that concurred with the initial report, right, as far as degradation and it continuing to get worse. Right?
Yeah, and ultimately, of the firms that came in, what was good to know is that everybody concurred with the report. Everybody came out with the same issues with degradation or missing flashings and the water infiltration. That's the root cause of the spalling and the mortar joints that need to be redone. So some of the different ideas that were put forward, we're able to capitalize on, and they will all end up into the design specifications moving forward.
Thank you for putting all that together.
Mr. Pepe, I'm going to ask you to continue the business and finance with the exception of the budget. If you could take all the motions together.
Okay. Let's see. Bills list pretty much standard. Next item looking at the treasurer's report. We're in a pretty good position. We actually were able to get caught up and a little bit forward on the treasurer's report. So we have the April, but also May, which will help us in closing out with the auditor. Otherwise, we would have to hold May off until August since we do not have a July meeting. After we get past the budget resolutions, we have approval of depositories and investment of district funds. This is an annual approval. These are the financial institutions in which we currently have active accounts with. I've simply broken down so that you can see, where they're located. This is, again, everything in line with the state's requirements for our fiduciary responsibility with district funds. And that was all laid out in, I think, Senate Bill 383 covers that from the Pennsylvania General Assembly. So that's pretty much pro forma. Moving back. The insurance policies, I covered the general commercial package. I covered the workers' compensation and the student accident insurance at length in the workshop meeting, so I'm not going to go into them. We're just now going to take the action on them. Cafeteria price increase. Again, that is no stranger to inflationary costs that are hitting that program, as well as labor costs which are hitting that program. I think the one thing that's a little different, or I should say a little more challenging, that also backs up the recommendation for the increases, which actually came from the state, is the fact that we, as well as other districts, are coming off of the summer stimulus option, where we received 100% reimbursement during the COVID pandemic. So at this point, it's a return to normalcy in the food service, which is not necessarily our best friend financially. So in order to try and guard against major subsidies of the food service, which would be taking money out of the general fund and or out of the classroom, I recommend these price increases as we continue to explore potentially outsourcing food service next year. And last but not least, the high school art and science bid awards. Again, this is an annual task that happens in the district. It's coordinated at the high school with the respective teachers in art and science. There's really nothing much to report here other than they did a diligent job of going through each item to ensure we're getting the items that we need in order to advance the curriculum at the best price possible.
Thank you for that succinct summary. Does anybody have any questions regarding support services or business and finance with the exception of budget, which we'll talk about next?
I just have one quick question. Thank you, Mr. Pepe, as always. Can you just comment, I saw in the bills list that our electric was like $70,000 or so. Is that something we're able to competitively bid or choose another supplier, kind of like?
Gas and electric's already been competitively bid.
Okay.
We're in a consortium with a number of districts.
Similar to the diesel?
Correct.
Great.
And those rates are fixed.
All right, can I have a motion to approve the motions contained in 7A through C and 8A through J, J, with the exception of C and D.
So moved.
First, Ms. Lau. Ms. King, any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, those motions carry. And last but not least, is our discussion about the budget. Oh, we still have human resources. So, let's do the budget next. Let's do the budget next. Okay, you're on, Mr. Pepe.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. Again, we've covered pretty much at length and done a lot of presentations on the budget, Dr. Mann and myself, and appreciate all the active questions, input, and help determination of where we finally came out. We have not changed any of the numbers from what was advertised for the 30-day period. We actually had it a little bit longer than the 30-day period from what we had approved. All of the breakout has stayed the same. I just want to make sure for the record that we have the appropriate information on the resolutions, and I think it speaks more to what's happening, so I'm just going to read through that. The first one will be that the Board of School Directors hereby officially adopts the school district of Southern Lehigh's 2022-23 fiscal school year budget, commencing with July 1, 2022, and ending with June 30th, 2023, as recommended. A copy of PDE 2028 final general fund budget fiscal years 22 through June 30th, 2023, that was proposed and adopted as stated at the official meeting of the Board of School Directors held Monday, May 9th, is included in the board packet. The next portion of that is the levying of millage. The estimated receipts from local sources remain $56,387,578, as set forth in the school district of Southern Lehigh fiscal school year budget for the year 2022-2023, officially adopted hopefully tonight. And this will include tax on the assessed valuation of real estate. In addition, the millage on the assessed valuation of real estate located within the confines of the school district based upon 100% of appraised valuation in compliance with the County Board of Commissioners as required is officially adopted tonight with passage of this and will be set at 17.2595 mils on the dollar, or $1.72 and change per $100 of assessed valuation to provide estimated income of $47,967,449 for the fiscal year commencing July 1st and ending June 30th, 2023. Madam President, members of the board, the next part of this resolution is the Act 511 taxes. The Act 511 taxes, without going through the whole thing, the documents before you, breaks down the 1% for transfer tax, which we are entitled to levy, and the said tax provides an estimated income of $891,862. Additionally, the Board of Directors will hopefully tonight enact enabling the resolution providing for the 1% tax on the earned income of residents in the school district area, which is levied by the authority of Act 511, known as the Local Tax Enabling Act. That will provide an estimated income of $5,576,088, and all of those numbers are already in on the revenue side to get to where we come out final. The local service tax, LST, remains set in the amount of $5 on individuals engaged in any occupation, trade, or profession within the corporate limits of the school district under the authority of Act 511 of 1965, PL 1257, as amended, also known as the Local Tax Enabling Act. And that is estimated to provide additional $56,652. So that covers all of the requirements in the resolution that we're bringing forward tonight. I might as well just move right on to the other portion, and the other portion is the homestead and farmstead exclusion. The homestead and farmstead exclusion, again, all set by law for the state, for each district. It really breaks down into a couple of areas, and I'm just going to highlight. The first one is gambling tax funds. Pennsylvania Department of Education has notified the school district that they will pay the school district during the school year pursuant to Act 153 PS 6926 as the property tax reduction allocation funded by gambling funds in the amount of $779,556.62. That's up slightly or significantly from last year. It's up about $200,000. The other portion of that is the Philadelphia tax credit reimbursement, which is $59,152.17. Combined, that gives us a total of $838,708, I believe, from the state. So that's a pretty good deal. Homestead properties were 6,006, farmstead were 33, So in total, we're looking at 6039, which is pretty consistent with what we had last year. Slightly up, but not enough to really go into greater detail on it. And with the, once we run the numbers and do all the calculations, it will affect properties for a total of $8,068. That's the maximum real estate assessed value reduction. And that kind of covers that. Are there any questions?
Could you just, as an overview of everything, one more time before we move forward with things, just give us a synopsis of the 30,000-foot view between budget reductions and the tax increase, and why we are doing that at this time, and where we are moving forward to needing a balanced budget. If you could just elaborate a little bit in just a very quick way for the public, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. One of the things that I had talked about early on was the fact that we were looking at a deficit budget. 6 of the last 7 years were actually deficit budgets, meaning we were spending more than we were taking in. Our expenses were outpacing our revenues. As a result, I had come before the board with the initial proposal to say I would recommend a 3% increase on the tax levy. That would generate additional amounts to cut the $3 million deficit that we were projecting and hopefully get us to a balanced budget by 2025, 2026. With that said, the board, as always, has to look at what is the impact on the tax base and how do we come to a budget that we can live with and not interject too much of a hardship on taxpayers while we're trying to maintain and balance this, the need to get back to a balanced budget. As a result, we were very successful in going back with the administration and finding areas that we could, tighten up, find savings, reduce the spend side. And at the same time, that allowed us to bring down the recommended increase on the millage on the revenue side to, I believe, 1.95% instead of 3%. What that does, it still leaves us with a shortfall, but instead of the estimated $3 million shortfall that we started out with, we're closer to about 1.6 million. We started out, even when we made that decision, we were around 1.8. So we continue to do that. One of the other questions that I have received from board members, and, obviously from members of the public who have challenged some of the questions is, could we cut more? Could we in fact reduce the budget? And my answer to that is simply the budget is a living document. It's a forecasted plan that needs to allow for things like contingencies. Contingencies are unforeseen events. We're living through one with the intermediate school. At the time when we were developing the budget, nobody saw that on the horizon. Change in needs. When the superintendent unveils a lot of the great educational planning that's moving forward, you need to be able to adapt and be responsive and nimble enough in your budget to redirect some of the budgetary dollars that are available for what is a higher priority. Staffing, our HR department, Mr. Pigeon does a great job of trying to find the best and the brightest to fill positions. It's very challenging when we're doing a budget in March for people that are here today, only to find by September, many of those people are no longer with us, and or we have new people coming in, and we have someone sitting out in the audience. So again, you have to be able to adjust to that. Restoring capital reserve, that is one of the critical needs in this budget and every budget moving forward. And the only way we're going to be able to restore capital reserve is to close out with positive years versus negative years so that we now have any overage that would be considered surplus and have the ability to deposit that into the capital reserve. I hope that kind of gives you a little flavor of where we're going and why. And I'll just cap my statements by saying, energy, whether it's electric, whether it's gas, whether it's diesel. Right now, we are in a real tough situation with every other district, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the United States and probably in the country. So those targets are moving constantly. And right now, I feel even with this budget where we are, we're probably going to be under in those areas. And therefore, we'll need to shift some of the savings that we're coming up with to cover any needs in those areas.
Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you, Mr. Pepe, that was really quite comprehensive. Can we get a motion for a
Second.
Moved by Ms. King, seconded by Dr. Ware. Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You got a roll call? Okay, sorry, Henry.
It's okay. Jeffrey Dimmick, absent. Kyle Gangwear, absent. Emily Gaiman, absent. Nicole King.
Yes.
William Lysette,
Yes.
Stephen Maud,
Aye.
Mary Jo Reinhardt,
Yes.
Priya Serene, absent. Christopher Wayock.
Yes.
And budget's approved.
I do wish to thank the board. Budgets are one of the most challenging things, and we've cut expenses, we've raised taxes. We've done a lot, every bit of this far. I thank the board for being here and for your efforts in doing the hard work. We are committed to continue in that effort. Doing great things for our kids and stuff like that.
Just for clarification through the chair, just make sure everybody understands that their vote is for all three of those resolutions that I went through. Okay, not that we need to call each one individually.
Yes, I did say that it was for those.
Thank you.
Okay.
Could I just thank the administration for their work on putting this together and thinking of all sides of this equation. It's vitally important that we keep our taxes under control, but yet it's also vitally important that we spend those dollars where they are needed and make an efficient and well-nourished student through our programs here. So thank you for that hard work. And it wasn't easy. I know that it's been a difficult road over the past months to come up with some of these realities, and we're, I think, getting there, and I just thank you for your time.
I just want to say last year of the presentation, not one word was addressed the cost of that part of the equation. Everything was revenue. And so I do thank you for addressing cost. That's important. So thank you.
Mr. Vidgen.
Thank you. Number 9, human resources. We have 13 items, A through M. If no one objects, we could go through them all, or if somebody has any questions. Hearing none.
Can I have motions? Ms. King.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Human resources motions are approved. And I don't believe do we have any other business? I think we covered the facility committee report earlier in the meeting, so we don't need to go through that. Do you have anything further, Dr. Manning?
I do not think so.
Okay.
I guess I forgot. I also want to thank our administrators for being out tonight and the great work that we do.
I don't know, do we have a visitor comment?
We have one.
Okay.
Nicole Dolan,
Hi there. I've been at, all of the public facility committee meetings. And, the last one was very interesting and, I appreciated hearing the expertise of a Mr. DeVino, who let you guys know about the, results of his checking out the roofs. I came to this meeting hoping to hear some update about that. It concerns me that, when he assessed all of the different roofs in the district, that, he mentioned that his biggest concern was Liberty Bell's roof, a portion of it. And, I was hoping to hear some more about that tonight, because I know that at the facilities meeting, it was questioned whether or not it could wait until the summer, until 2024, and he recommended it not. And I know you guys, commended his expertise and really, valued what he had to say. And I was hoping to hear more about that. And it concerns me that it wasn't mentioned. It's possible it could be helpful if the facility committee meetings were broadcast and recorded the same way that these board meetings are, because, I think a lot of Liberty Bell families and the community there would appreciate hearing those concerns about the Liberty Bell roof and the timing. Thank you.
Mr. Cox?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge the Boy Scout in the audience, working on his merit badge. Thank you for attending, and hopefully this gives you a taste of what happens in the educational / political process. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Maybe perhaps a future school board member, we need great people.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned. 7:30. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.